It's impossible to delve into aviation history without hearing of the P-51's legend at least once or seeing that Red Tails clip where the guy pulls 10 million Gs. But for a plane so famous for being so good, the P-51C feels like a chore to fly. At least, that is until you learn to abuse its advantages, at which point it becomes the most untouchable plane in its tier, and perhaps the most fun Mustang in the game. If you want to learn, I've got you covered. So, why play the P-51C? The P-51 is the same BR, and instead of 50 cals, it has cannons. The answer is the performance. The absolutely ludicrous performance. While the P-51's engine power drops off a cliff at 7,000 feet, the P-51C's power stays good until well after 20,000 feet. You are freakishly fast at 3.7, able to hit 600 kilometers an hour on the deck, and over 700 at altitude. No other 3.7 comes close, and you will be faster than every enemy fighter even in an up tier. This speed comes with a caveat. Your acceleration below 400 isn't the greatest. On the deck, going from 3 to 400 kilometers an hour takes roughly 14 seconds. The 109F4 does the same in 13 seconds. After that, the 51C pulls ahead by far, so remember to stay fast. You are quick in the long run, but you can still be caught if you make mistakes. People complain about the P-51's 30-minute min fuel, but for the American fighter pilot, this is not a bug. It is a welcome feature, as it allows you to stay flying for the entire match without returning to base. And there is an exploit you can use to get infinite WEP without burning up the engine too. I'll show you how to do that in a couple minutes, but first let's optimize how we use the armament because it can be a pain in the butt until you get used to it. With only 450 cals and 1260 rounds, the killing power of this vehicle can seem underwhelming. However, the guns can do their job and set fires with glancing hits, so use tracer belts and a convergence between 400 and 600 meters. I prefer 500 myself, as I find it to be the perfect combination for hitting people in head-ons, while also being able to concentrate firepower on people up close. One other thing is that the inner pair of 50 cals have 350 rounds each, while the outer pair have 280. Meaning that for your last 140 rounds, you will only be firing with 2 guns. This won't be a big deal in the early game, but you should keep it in mind in case you have to bet everything on a single shot during a close match. If you are having problems with your aim, tap fire with half-second bursts. This is counterintuitive since you may already be having problems with killing your enemy when you unload your full magazine, but it makes sense because you have no idea how much you are missing by when you are firing a stream of bullets. Some bullets are behind the enemy, and some are in front, but they all look the same, making correction impossible. By contrast, it is easier to see how much you miss by when you fire a short burst, and then adjust your aim to go full cyclic and send the enemy back to the hangar. Unfortunately, aiming is the simple part. You need to know how to use your performance to get in position. First, set up the P-51C's infinite WEP cheat code, which will give you a big leg up on the competition during the mid to late game where the P-51 is strongest. To do this, use the tutorial that I've linked below to set up your manual engine controls. Once that's done, enable manual engine controls on the runway and set 100% prop pitch. Turn off automatic radiator control and increase both oil radiator and radiator to 100%. This will keep you in the white forever, whereas if you ran automatic and held WEP for the entire game, you would eventually burn out your engine. This works for every P-51, including the A-36. Note that your mech settings reset when you repair, and you will have to redo them. Like with most US fighters at this tier, you should side climb, but only a little. To maximize your climb rate, adjust your climb angle to maintain 250 IAS. Make sure to turn on task plus IAS measurement in the settings too. How much you side climb depends on the matchmaking, as well as what your team is doing. There's no set altitude where you should start playing aggressive. You should turn in once you can enter the fight at the same altitude or higher than your enemies. If this is confusing, count the number of spotted enemies while you're climbing. If they're all spotted rushing the deck, then you're good to push in. If you're halfway through the climb and only 5 or 6 guys are spotted, the enemy team are still climbing in the backline, and you'll need to be more cautious. You can sometimes turn in while the enemies are still higher than you, as long as you have teammates that are directly below them, and you notice the enemies reacting to those teammates. In these cases, the enemy will almost always die for your team, giving up the altitude to you. The reason you would gamble and be so aggressive is so you can get to the fight before everyone is dead, therefore helping your team and increasing your kills per game, which will help your RP and Silver Lions. Once you are in position, it is time to exercise your speed advantage and begin the attack. Boom and Zoom is a discipline based around stitching the enemy with 50 cals and ditching the area. However, what many people don't realize is that a fundamental part of B and Z is breaking off the attack before you shoot if it looks like you will waste too much energy and get third-partied, or if sticking too close on their 6 could get you reversed and shot. Most people will defend against you with a diving spiral or split S, which is a vertical 180 in which they turn directly underneath you to give the hardest shot possible. These can be very difficult to hit, and if you have doubts about your ability to hit the shot, don't follow the maneuver. Wait until they come out of it, and then turn after them again using a high yo-yo, which is an upwards oblique turn that turns your speed back into altitude and resets your position. This will force them to keep repeating their defense, and eventually they will make a mistake and you can collect the kill. From this point forward, I'm going to assume that you are working on your situational awareness, as you will need to look around and keep tabs on both enemies and allies when dealing with multiple opponents in the area. Get used to using the C key while simultaneously controlling the plane with your keyboard. You should also increase the size of the minimap in the settings menu, as it will show you every spotted enemy within a 5-kilometer circle, allowing you to take in the situation at a glance. When you are above multiple opponents, you will usually want to go for the guy that is trailing towards the back of the group. This is because if you get caught up with the guys in the front, the guy in the back will easily be able to see you and come 30 party you. Whereas going for the guy in the back of the line means his friends will have to 190 to come help him, spending a lot of energy. They may not even know that their teammate is under attack in the first place. However, there are exceptions to the rule. If the guys towards the front of the group have a large altitude advantage over the guys behind them, or one of them is a high-level threat, you should target them first. High-level threats are enemies that have so much engine power that they can easily get to a higher energy state if you miss a pass, making it dangerous to kill them with BNZ or a chandel, which is a tactic that I will show you in a moment. These high-energy aircraft you will face are mainly the Yak-3, LA-7, Ki-44-2, VL-Permersky, and the Bf-109 series. If you have the chance to take an easy shot on any of these planes, you should go after it before chasing lesser threats. But don't give up all your altitude just to take them out. If there's multiple low-threat enemies up high and the dangerous enemies are on the deck and can't attack you just yet, deal with the higher enemies first so they can't get on your 6 for free. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that gets P-51C pilots killed is panicking when they miss a pass and get shot at. Your plane is faster, but wild maneuvers will bleed speed and allow the enemy to cut you off, while keeping you in the low speed zone where your acceleration is average. Instead, make small, unpredictable rolls and pulls utilizing tons of negative G, which uses very little speed and makes hitting you nearly impossible. You can predict when the enemy is about to shoot by watching when his wings settle, and make a small jig the moment before he fires. Do this until you're out of guns range and can reset the fight with your speed advantage. What makes this plane different is its ability to be aggressive in the boom and zoom roll. Compared to later, less OP Mustangs such as the P-51D5 and D30, the 51C's speed and acceleration allow it to get out of stickier situations, allowing you to execute risky attacks if you sense a reward. However, you will often lack an altitude advantage or even have a disadvantage when things are going wrong, which is hard to deal with when flying a plane that can't outturn everything it fights. That doesn't mean you're totally out of luck. The P-51's 50 cal significantly outrange most other guns, especially the low-velocity MG-151s mounted to German and Italian fighters. Practice firing off rounds at long ranges in the head-on between the 1.5 and 1 kilometer range. These can occasionally hit, setting cooling links or even causing fires. If the enemy dodges, then you keep shooting and hopefully kill them, whereas if they full commit, it's time to jink beneath their nose so you can get past the head-on. The P-51 is awkward at dodging guns, so make sure you have speed before taking the head-on. At least 500 kph is ideal, but you can take head-ons at 400 if you have to. If they survive, your next action depends on what plane you are fighting and what the situation is. The majority of the time, you'll want to run away, especially if you're fighting a turn fighter. However, if there are no other enemies in the area and the enemy is a plane with worse turn rates such as a twin engine, go ahead and dogfight the guy, as it is the quickest way to get the kill. As you get more confident in your dogfighting skills, you can even take on Bf-109s using the tactics I will show you in a moment. If the opponent is too high above you and taking the head-on would result in a trade, you still have options. Since this plane is so fast, it holds its energy well in a dive. If you bait the enemy into following you and put the nose down in a shallow dive soon enough, you will be able to drain away their energy because they have higher drag, resulting in their advantage being completely eliminated in the long run. But make sure to do this early, at least 2 to 3 kilometers out. If the guy is coming at you at 500 and you're going 250, it takes time to make up the speed difference, even if your plane is way faster in the long run. Being forced to flee may seem like it places you in a powerless position, but this strategy combines with the next P-51 tactic. When you are fortunate enough to have a teammate or a squadmate in the area and you don't want to take the dogfight because you could get third party or lose, it is time to use bait and switch tactics. In this scenario, both you and your teammate fly into different directions, baiting the enemy into focusing on one guy. Since you are faster than your enemies, you will eventually have space to turn around and clear the 6 of your teammate. But, you've played this game before. You know how it is. You'll rarely have cooperative teammates when flying outside of a squad, so use the next option. If necessary, be selfish and use your friendlies as bait if they are uncommunicative or unhelpful. This is done by gaining space between yourself and the enemy on your 6. Then fly towards your slower teammates. When the enemy sees that they aren't going to catch you and that there's an easier target in the area, they will usually break off, allowing you to come back with the advantage. Now, for this next one, you'll need to account for the P-51C's performance gap. Between 10 and 13,000 feet, this aircraft's engine performance has a valley, which can be an issue because this is also the peak performance zone of planes like the Yak-3 and Spitfire series. You are still faster than everyone else, but your climb rate briefly suffers compared to the competition. So be careful while you're in this altitude zone. You can still make things work, but you may wish to either climb out of it or use a defensive dive to bait both you and your opponent below this zone. When you have an opponent on your 6 and you're at a higher altitude with equal speed or a speed advantage, it's time to use the strongest tool in the P-51's arsenal, the chandel. You will know you are faster than the enemy when they are on your dead 6 and the distance is increasing, but you can also be faster even if they are closing the distance. This is because when they are cutting off your flight path, it appears that they have more speed than you due to taking an intercept course, even if this is not the case. This illusion is the foundation of the chandel energy trap. This maneuver starts with a very shallow turn that begins leading upwards, baiting the enemy into chasing you up, which will steadily drain their energy. As you both get slower, you tighten the turn and continue using the vertical, maintaining the illusion that they are catching you, when in reality they will stall up beneath your guns and become easy prey. The chandel is almost a guaranteed kill when properly executed, but it will get you shot down if you don't have a large enough energy advantage over the enemy. It's also more difficult to pull off against enemies with lots of engine power and good ability to maintain their speed in a turn, which is why I recommended that you destroy these enemies as soon as possible. You can still kill Yak-3s and Bf-109s with this maneuver, but it's more difficult. This is one of the most consistent ways to kill Japanese planes in the 1v1. You don't always have to run away and come back for risky head-ons, and you can still pull this off even if they start above you by using a defensive dive. If they fall for the bait and drain their energy by diving after you, killing them is a matter of time. Do be very careful, as the low stall speeds of turn fighters mean they can follow you up into the vertical and kill you if your advantage isn't large enough. Additionally, since your plane turns worse at high altitude, you will need more room to come down from the top of your stall the higher you go. With the complicated stuff out of the way, it's time to cover the P-51's most underrated aspect, which is its turning ability. The P-51C is much lighter than the D models, and it shows. This plane barely elevator compresses at high speeds, meaning you can pull much harder than the Bf-109s while you're above 400 IAS. This is also complemented by the combat flaps, which can extend up to 650 IAS without ripping, allowing your pilot to pull a spine-crushing 11 Gs. Because you have greater turn rate and a smaller turning circle than the 109 at high speeds, you can win the dogfight with them as long as you open the fight while going fast, and you can even reverse them by abusing their roll and elevator compression, as well as the mediocre velocity of their guns. This is done by baiting them into a dive and deploying the combat flaps, then rolling and pulling around their flight path to keep yourself out of their nose while they creep up behind you. You may wish to throttle drop, but don't overdo it, as you don't want the guy to simply run away and turn your B&Z tactics back on your head. Once you are behind the 109, the pilot will almost always panic, and you can follow them into the dogfight and shoot them down even if you go below 400. Remember that the flaps decrease your turn rate in the long run due to losing too much speed, so don't leave out the boards. If you're behind the 109 and need to pick up some position, use what's known as a low yo-yo, which is a downwards cut to trade altitude for speed, getting you back into the P-51's optimal turning zone. However, if the fight goes to lower speeds and you start losing, it's best to bail out while you still can and reset for another dogfight where things might go your way. You can almost always exit the fight if you see your loss coming soon enough, but if you wait too long, you will meet the fate of your fellow P-51C pilots who didn't watch this guide. As powerful as this plane is, it becomes downright broken when flown in a squad with other P-51Cs. Since you're fast enough to run away and bait every enemy that you encounter, you can easily work your way top down and demolish teams when flying with a couple of friends. I plan to make a video on squad tactics in the near future, but they aren't the main focus of this video. If you are a newer pilot, these concepts will be a lot to take in at once. There are plenty of level 100s who don't know this stuff, so don't feel too bad if you hopped in the game and things don't go your way at first. If you can master the P-51, you will also have learned fundamental concepts that will serve you well in other props. I made this video because the P-51C is one of the most fun B&Z fighters in the game, but there are plenty of pilots out there who are struggling because the game's tutorials don't give you any of the necessary information for success. Tell me what you thought in the comments. As always, I've linked my Discord so you can join my small community. Have fun, and I'll catch you in the next video.